Hey kids, welcome to section 3.4 standardized budgets. Today you're going to learn how to calculate recommended percentages for personal budgets. The big question for today is what happens when you spend all your money for the month on new clothes? Well, you won't have any money to eat. You won't have any money for gas. You might look good, but you're not going to be able to go anywhere. So it's important that you look at how much of your budget you're spending on each type of item. Are you spending more on food than clothes? Are you spending more on water than rent? All these different things are really important to look at. So, since the need to budget expenditures is a universal need, everybody needs to know how to budget. Recommended budgets have been developed and made available by financially knowledgeable people. So you have people in the banking industry, people in the financial world that have said, you know what? We see patterns. We think that people are tending to spend this percent of their money on clothing every month and this percent of their money on housing every month. And so things called standardized budgets have been prepared that recommend percentages for different personal budgeting expenditures. So, for instance, if you look at the pie graph that's on this slide, we see that the biggest amount of money each month should be spent on housing. Then the next biggest is taxes. And then the next biggest is called tithing. Now, tithing in the olden days was your contributions to church. But tithing could be any kind of contributions to any organization outside of your family. So if you donate to the Red Cross, if you donate to the when the post office comes around and picks up food on Saturdays from your mailbox, if you donate to Goodwill, things like that. And then it lists other things. Food is the next one at 7%. And then a bunch of the rest of them are at 5%. Clothing, medical, insurance, recreation, savings, transportations, utilities. And then finally, miscellaneous is at 3%. And so this doesn't mean that you can't spend more or spend less of your, income on these items, but these are the recommended percentages. For example, housing in Danville is going to be a lot cheaper than housing in the city of Chicago. Clothing in rural towns are going to be maybe less plentiful and more expensive than clothing in big towns because there isn't as much of it. So these are recommended percentages of your gross income that you should be spending on different categories of expenditures. And again, they're not set in stone. You can spend more, you can spend less. But if you follow these guidelines, you're better off being on a budget than if you didn't. So, for example, the Hearts with no children have an annual income of $65,921. Find the recommended amount for them to budget annually for housing. Well, you should be budgeting 25% of your gross income on housing. So I need to find 25% of the income. So I'm going to take $65,921 and multiply it by 25%, which remember is 0.25. So housing, we'll just, a little reminder here, is 25%. So when I multiply, I get $16,480.25. So what the Hearts can do is they can look at how much did they actually spend on housing for the year and then compare it to what's recommended they spend on housing for the year. And then they can see if they're spending too much, if maybe they could afford to spend a little bit nicer of a house or more on utilities and things like that. Okay, example number 2, Mr. and Mrs. Pasurkis earn $54,000 annually. They spent $4,321 on food last year. What percent of their budget did they spend on food? Round to the nearest percent. All right, so when I want to find the percent of their budget they spent on food, I'm going to put how much they spent for food on top of a fraction and the total amount of money that they earned on the bottom. So I'm going to take $4,321 and I'm going to divide by 54,000. This is going to give me 0.08 or 8%. Remember, to change a decimal to a percentage, you move the decimal 2 spots to the right. It's the opposite of what we've been doing. So compare this percentage to the recommended amount. Did the Pacircuses spend more or less than the recommended amount? Well, let's go up top. For food, it is recommended for food that you spend 7% of your budget. Well, they spent 8%. 8% is greater than 7%. So they spent more than the recommended amount. So you can find your own percentages and then you can compare them to the recommended percentages to see if you spent too much or if you can afford to spend a little bit more. All right, these questions aren't necessarily having to do with the pie chart, but other ideas about saving in general. Number 3, Lisa likes to go to one movie per week. She usually spends $12 on her ticket and $10 on a drink and popcorn. How much money would she save in 1 year if she went on Tuesdays when the price of a ticket was half off and she didn't have any snacks? Well, let's see how much she spends regularly, and then we can see how much she spends on Tuesdays, and then we can see which one is greater. So regularly, she spends $12 on a ticket and $10 on snacks. So that's $22 every time she goes to the movies. If she goes once a week, there are 52 weeks in a year. So she's going to spend $1,144 going every week to the movies if the ticket is $12 and she gets a drink and a popcorn for 10. If she goes on Tuesdays, the ticket is half off. So normally it's $12. Now it's $6. And she doesn't get any snacks. She goes once a week. So times 52. This way she only spends $312. So how much did she save? 1,144 minus 312. She will save $832. Imagine that. Just switching the day of the week that you go to the movies on and bringing your own snacks is going to save you $800. That's insane. All right, number 4. Ken really likes his lattes, but they are costing him a fortune. He spends $5.75 each workday for a large latte, and Ken works 5 days a week. Ken really needs to cut back on spending, so he has decided to only get a small latte at the cost of $3.75. How much money will Ken save over the course of 1 year? All right, well, if he buys the large, he's going to be spending $5.75 a day times 5 days a week. So that's $28.75 a week. But there are 52 weeks in a year. So we multiply by 52. In 1 year, he is spending $1,495 on lattes. Well, let's see if he buys a small. If he buys a small, he's going to pay $3.75 a day, 5 days a week. So that's $18.75 a week. But there are 52 weeks in a year. So he's going to spend $975 for the year. So how much money will he save? 1,495 minus 975. he is going to save 520 bucks. That's crazy. Come on, Ken, get the small. All right, kids. If you have any questions, please let me know. And as always, keep calm and keep trucking.